The moon is often associated with legends and myths, but it has prominent effects on the Earth, and one of them might lead to trouble. Everyone knows the tides depend heavily on the moon's pull, but what happens when things go too far? According to NASA, the moon will soon cause record flooding, and we must be prepared or risk extreme consequences. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite, and it's the largest in the solar system in relation to its corresponding planet. Over the centuries, it has served as a beacon for humanity, with the lunar calendar being recorded according to its movements. But there are several exciting phenomena associated with it. One is that we always see the same side of the moon, even though the moon and the Earth are constantly moving. Another probable effect was explored in a study that revealed early Earth spun much faster, with a computer model showing that a day just lasted 6 hours almost 4.5 billion years ago. This was also seen by observing photosynthetic bacterial layers known as stromatolites. By analyzing layers from 850 million years ago, scientists uncovered evidence of a 21-hour day, while those from 400 million years ago showed a 22-hour day. The moon's gravitational pull affects the Earth's spin energy, which has slowed down gradually. The moon is also credited with causing the Earth's tilted axis, which maintains a seasonal stability. But none of this is responsible for the unprecedented rise in flooding around the world. The most significant influence of the moon on Earth is how it controls tidal movement. You might have visited the beach and noticed that the water is much higher at night and recedes during the day. What happens is that the moon's gravitational force pulls the sea as it creates something called tidal force. This force causes the water to bulge on the sides closest and farthest from the moon. The tidal force is created due to centrifugal force. The Earth experiences a high tide twice daily as it rotates around its axis. But how does this phenomenon relate to the rising danger of flooding in recent years? Well, it has to do with the lunar nodal cycle. Every 18.6 years, the moon's orbit veers around an average of 5 degrees relative to the equator. This cycle was first reported in 1728 as researchers observed the tides becoming smaller when the distance between the lunar plane and the equator grew more significant, and vice versa. This means that the high tide is also higher than usual, which raises the sea levels. This, paired with another growing problem, has caused an increase in the risk of flooding, and that is climate change. Rising temperatures around the Earth have triggered an increase in ocean volume, which naturally puts coastal areas at risk. High tide floods have already been a significant problem, especially in the USA. To put things in perspective, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported around 600 high tide floods in 2019, but a new study has revealed that this number will rise alarmingly in the coming years. Led by the NASA Sea Level Change Science team from the University of Hawaii, the study found that coastal areas around America were at risk of recurring floods, often lasting for extended periods. Estimates say the flooding could last up to a month or longer. A NASA administrator, Bill Nilsson, said low-lying areas were at higher risk. He pointed out that rising sea levels, high tides, and climate change grouped together were making floods more common, and said that, quote, "it will only get worse." Phil Thompson, the study's lead, pointed out that the effects, even if they weren't immediately disastrous, would worsen over time. Even if the floods only led to a small amount of water overflowing, their occurrence 10 to 15 times per month means people can't get to their jobs. A separate study showed that the sea level could rise as much as 30 centimeters above today's waterline in U.S. coastal areas by 2050. Since this natural event cannot be averted, how can we prepare ourselves? Benjamin Hamilton, who leads NASA's Sea Level Change team, firmly stated that the floods, made worse by the moon, would cause damage to the infrastructure and completely alter coastlines. To prepare for the change, he has spent extensive time observing the high tides movements and the occurrence of these floods. He said knowing which months had more floods would help from a planning perspective. Thompson has already developed a high tide flood tool that acts as a resource for the general public, and it's expected to be updated with further findings. If you're finding this information on the moon's movements interesting, please do pause this video to give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more valuable content too. Also, press that notification button to get updated whenever we post a new video. Now wait until you hear why you need to know about these floods and how they may alter everything we know. It won't just be coastal settlements facing the brunt of these floods, it will also lead to dire consequences for wildlife ecosystems. And one ecosystem at high risk is saltwater marshes. Ilya Roshlin, visiting professor at Rutgers University, researches the relationship between the lunar nodal cycle and salt marsh mosquito populations, and her work has led to some worrying revelations. The high tide causes disturbance to its cycle, and its decreasing population has a domino effect on the marshes. As salt marsh invertebrates perish, and acute food storage and disruption will rise in the global economy. If salt marshes drown due to rising sea levels, we lose areas that serve as fisheries for several types of fish, including 75% of fishery species. This would cause great turmoil in the fishing industry. Christine Hoppensperger, an environmental scientist at Northern Kentucky University, studies the salinization of freshwater wetlands. She pointed out that these wetlands are much more diverse than salt marshes and experience more tidal fluctuations. With rising sea levels, freshwater species will be forced upstream as the former freshwater area becomes salinized and develops less diverse, salt-resistant plants. This would lead to significant economic disturbance, mainly because it lessens the area for freshwater species. But this isn't the only area affected by the lunar nodal cycle. El Niño and La Niña, collectively known as the El Niño Southern Oscillation Cycle, are winds that have an extremely prominent effect on the weather all over the world. The two winds are events that break the normal flow of trade winds. Usually, they flow west along the equator, but they weaken during El Niño, which causes the winds to flow east. The opposite takes place during El Niña as the trade winds grow stronger and flow west with more force. Since these winds affect the sea currents and the weather, they have been studied extensively over the years. While this phenomenon is usually unpredictable, researchers have found a link by observing its relationship with the lunar nodal cycle. Researchers followed the moon's 18.6-year nodal cycle to try and predict these winds. The study is critical because the winds significantly influence the sea, and predicting them can also help prevent disasters caused by floods along coastal areas. The moon also affects polar temperatures and the speed at which glaciers melt. For example, scientists have observed the North and South poles become 0.55 degrees Celsius warmer during a full moon. Moreover, tidal waves contribute to breaking up ice sheets and altering ocean heat flows. This directly impacts the amount of ice that melts into the Arctic Ocean. The moon not only generates tidal waves and currents at the surface of the ocean, but also deep within it. Chris Wilson, an expert in marine physics and ocean climate, says, quote, "These currents and waves may either melt or break up sea ice due to either the transport and mixing of warmer waters or due to straining motions acting to tear apart the ice into smaller pieces, which are then more susceptible to melting." It's evident that the moon has an enormous impact on the sea, but the rising sea levels have already started causing problems that people must be prepared for. A report by NOAA mentioning the rising sea levels stated that the floods occurring were expected to increase tenfold in the next 30 years. To portray precisely how extreme the situation is, imagine a flood that causes damage to the infrastructure along coastal areas in southern USA every 4 to 5 years. Now, how would the economy survive if the same natural disaster hit the coastline 4 to 5 times in a single year? Andrea Dutton of the University of Wisconsin-Madison said the flooding in the USA would take a whole new level in the coming decades. The current rate of sea level increase is much higher than in the past 2,500 years. The sea rises 0.13 inches annually, and is expected to grow almost a foot by 2050 as the sea volume continues to swell with melting glaciers. It's evident that the world has to band together to counter the climate crisis, or the results will be harrowing. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave us a comment below because we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. And remember to subscribe to our channel for more valuable content just like this. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never ever miss a video. Thank you for watching.